She hid her late father's fortune from her husband. It ended up saving her life. What makes a person valuable? Ask a therapist. They'll say self-worth, boundaries, the capacity to recognize manipulation. Ask a con artist. They'll point to bank accounts, inheritance potential, the vulnerability that comes with grief. And when you're standing in the hallway of your own home, listening to your husband toast your father's death with his mistress, you learn which answer actually destroys you. Worth isn't philosophical, it's monetary, transferable, and mine was calculated the day Julian Vance learned my father had 6 months to live. My name is Maya Vance, and I am that statistic. 29 years old, recently orphaned, caramel-skinned and beautiful in a way that made me easy to target. In a world where your last name opens doors and your trust fund defines your prospects, I was a mark. A long game, a 3-year investment that Julian played with the patience of a man who knew exactly how much I was worth. Hi, and welcome to Lumi's Love Library. This is me, quietly putting my writing out into the world for the first time. I'm 25, I love stories, and I believe words still matter, even when you're not sure who's listening yet. If you're here, even by accident, thank you for giving this story a chance. Let's continue. Mothers warn their daughters. Watch out for the ones who come around when you're vulnerable, or you'll end up like those women on the news. My father tried to warn me. How could I have listened? I was in love, or what I thought was love, the kind that made me ignore the way Julian's eyes would glaze over whenever I talked about anything that wasn't my father's health or his business holdings. I destroyed my father's peace in his final days. Our Sunday dinners became tense affairs. His pointed questions about prenuptial agreements dismissed. His suggestion that we wait to marry until after his treatments ignored. My little cousin Zara's whispered concern that Julian felt wrong, brushed aside as jealousy. But grief has a way of sharpening your senses. 7 days after I buried my father, 7 days after I stood at his grave and felt the world collapse into a single point of unbearable loss, I came home early from the attorney's office. The estate consultation had been mercifully brief. Too brief, I would realize later. Just enough time for Julian to think I'd be gone for hours. The house still smelled like funeral flowers. Those awful lilies that well-meaning neighbors kept sending, their cloying sweetness coating the back of my throat every time I walked through the door. But underneath that scent, as I stood in the foyer with my black veil crumpled in my fist, I caught something else. Champagne. Dom Perignon, if I wasn't mistaken. The kind Julian said we couldn't afford right now, not with the funeral expenses and the estate still unsettled. I should have called out. Should have announced myself like a normal person returning to her own home. But something in the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen, bright, unrestrained, celebratory, made me stop, made me slip off my heels and move silently across the hardwood floor. Julian's voice carried down the hallway, rich with satisfaction. To the old man finally kicking the bucket and making us rich. The sound of glass clinking, a woman's laugh, low and knowing. You played it perfectly, Julian. 3 years of playing the devoted son-in-law. I wasn't sure you could keep it up. Please. The man was so desperate to see his precious Maya settled before he died, it was almost too easy. Hold her hand during chemo. Bring flowers to the hospice. Look devastated at appropriate moments. I could have written a manual. My heart didn't break. That's what they say in movies, in books, in those moments when the world shifts beneath your feet. But my heart didn't break. It turned to ice, sharp and clear and deadly. Because breaks can be mended, ice cuts through everything in its path. I leaned against the wall, my caramel skin ghostly pale in the dim light filtering through the curtains, and I listened. Really listened, the way I should have listened to my father when he said, "There's something calculated about that boy, Maya, something I can't put my finger on. Elena, we need to move faster." Julian again, his tone shifting to business. "The accounts we've accessed so far are substantial, but nothing like what that paranoid bastard should have had. He owned half the commercial real estate downtown. There has to be more." "There is." Elena's voice was cool, professional. "I accessed his medical records 18 months before you even met Maya. Terminal diagnosis, no aggressive treatment plan. He knew he was dying, and he knew he had time to hide assets. Men like Lawrence Vance don't leave their fortunes sitting in obvious places. Then where? Trusts, offshore accounts, maybe even physical assets we haven't discovered yet. But here's the beautiful part. Maya doesn't know either. I've been monitoring her searches, her emails, her calls to the attorney. She's completely in the dark. And she'll stay that way." Julian's voice dropped lower, intimate in a way that made my stomach turn. "Once we find the main cache, we can figure out how to access it without her. The grieving widow, so devastated by her loss, so reliant on her strong husband to guide her through the complexities of her father's estate. What if she becomes a problem?" A pause, long enough for me to count my heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Then we solve the problem. Grief makes people fragile. Accidents happen. I pressed my hand against my mouth, tasting salt, realizing tears were streaming down my face. But they weren't tears of heartbreak anymore. They were tears of rage, pure and crystalline. Because Julian Vance had made a critical miscalculation. He thought my father was paranoid. He thought those final conversations we had, the ones where Dad's eyes would clear despite the morphine and he'd grip my hand and whisper about provisions and protection, were just the ramblings of a dying man. But Lawrence Vance hadn't been rambling. He'd been preparing. And somewhere in this house, the house Julian thought he'd charmed his way into, the house he was already mentally redecorating with his mistress, was a laptop. An old, battered thing my father had refused to upgrade despite my pleading. The laptop he'd used in the hospital during his final weeks, typing away with an intensity that had worried the nurses. I'd thought he was journaling, processing his mortality, making peace. I'd been wrong. My father had been building a trap. A ghost trust, he'd called it in one of our last conversations, his voice barely a whisper. A fortune that existed in the spaces between legal systems, accessible only through a sequence that Julian would never find because Julian had never bothered to learn what mattered to my father. His granddaughter's birthday, his late wife's maiden name, the street where he'd built his first property. Details a loving son-in-law would know, details a con artist wouldn't bother to learn. I straightened slowly, wiping my face, feeling something shift in my chest. Not breaking, not even healing, sharpening. Julian wanted to play the long game? Fine. I'd show him what a short fuse looked like. But first, I needed to walk into that kitchen. Needed to look at the man I'd married. This white man with his calculated charm and his practiced concern and his brown eyes that had never, not once, actually seen me, and pretend I still believed in him. The performance of a lifetime. One last show for the devoted husband, and then I'd burn his entire world down. I smoothed my black dress, tucked my veil into my purse, and painted on the expression I'd worn for the past 7 days. Grief, confusion, the desperate need for someone to lean on. It wasn't even hard. I'd been practicing my whole marriage. I walked into the kitchen. Julian and Elena were standing by the island, champagne flutes in hand, his arm around her waist in a way that spoke of long familiarity. She was everything I wasn't: sharp-suited, blonde, cold-eyed, the kind of woman who looked at spreadsheets the way other people looked at art. Beautiful in a corporate, untouchable way. They both froze when they saw me. Maya. Julian's face transformed in an instant. The smile vanished. The arm dropped. Concern flooded his features with the ease of someone changing masks. "Baby, you're home early. I thought—" "The attorney had an emergency." My voice came out small, broken, perfect. "We're rescheduling for next week." "Oh, sweetheart." He moved toward me, and I let him. Let him pull me into an embrace that smelled like expensive cologne and lies. "This is Elena Thorne. She's a financial consultant I brought in to help us navigate your father's estate. I know how overwhelming this must be for you." Elena extended her hand, her smile professional and distant. "Mrs. Vance, I'm so sorry for your loss." I shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip, the cool assessment in her eyes. This was the woman who'd hacked my medical records, who'd helped Julian plot my father's exploitation, who was planning, even now, how to eliminate me if I became inconvenient. "Thank you," I whispered. "I appreciate any help. I don't really understand finances." That part was true, at least. I'd never needed to. Dad had handled everything, and then Julian had taken over with such smooth confidence that I'd been grateful. Grateful to be prey. "Of course." Elena's smile widened fractionally. "That's what we're here for." Julian kissed my forehead, and I felt his lips curve against my skin. He thought he'd won. They both did. But as I stood there in my own kitchen, playing the role of the lost widow, I was already counting moves, already planning, because my father hadn't raised a fool. He'd raised a fighter. He'd just also raised a woman who believed in love, in trust, in the goodness of people. That woman died 7 days ago, buried alongside Lawrence Vance. The woman standing in this kitchen, letting her husband's mistress offer condolences while they drank champagne bought with stolen money, was someone new, someone colder, someone who understood that in Julian's world, worth was measured in dollars. And I was about to show him exactly how much this particular mark was worth. Every single penny. I waited until Julian left for work the next morning. He kissed me goodbye with such tenderness, such manufactured concern, that I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I clung to him, let my voice crack when I said I didn't know how I'd get through the day without him. "You're so strong, baby," he whispered against my hair. "Your father would be so proud of how you're handling this." The door closed behind him. I counted to 60, watching through the window as his car disappeared down the tree-lined street. Then I moved. My father's laptop sat in the back of my closet, buried under shoeboxes and winter scarves, exactly where I'd shoved it after the funeral. I'd told myself I wasn't ready to go through his personal files, his photos, the digital remnants of a life cut short. But that had been the grieving daughter talking, the woman I'd been a week ago, before champagne toasts and casual discussions of my potential murder. The laptop was old, heavy, The kind of machine Dad had insisted worked just fine despite my offers to buy him something newer. I carried it to the dining room table, plugged it in, and watched the screen flicker to life. His password was my mother's birthday. It had always been my mother's birthday. The desktop loaded, and I stared at the folders: tax documents, property records, medical files, and one labeled simply Maya's future. My hands were shaking as I opened my banking app on my phone first. The joint account Julian and I shared, the one he'd insisted on after we married, saying it made things simpler, more trusting. I scrolled through the transactions, my chest tightening with each swipe. Transfers, dozens of them, small enough not to trigger alerts. 500 here, 1,000 there, sometimes 2,000 disguised as household expenses or investment opportunities. They went back 28 months, over 2 years of systematic drainage that I'd never noticed because I'd trusted my husband to handle our finances. The savings account my father had set up for me when I was 16 showed a balance that made my stomach drop. $63,000. It should have been closer to 400,000. Years of birthday gifts, graduation money, the modest inheritance from my grandmother, all of it gone. I opened the investment portfolio Dad had established, the one that was supposed to be untouchable, set up through his private wealth manager. The balance loaded slowly, and when the numbers appeared, I had to read them 3 times to believe them. $12,000. 12,000. Where there should have been over 1,000,000. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I pulled up my father's laptop, searching frantically for his financial software, his records, anything that would tell me this was a mistake, a technical error, something fixable. That's when I saw it. A folder I'd almost missed, labeled System Utilities in a way that looked official, forgettable. Except my father had been meticulous about organization. He wouldn't have left random system files on his desktop. I opened it. Inside were screenshots, dozens of them, timestamps going back 3 years, my login screens, my password entries, my banking sessions, every keystroke I'd made on my personal laptop, captured and cataloged. A text file labeled "Read this first, Maya" sat at the top. My vision blurred as I clicked it open. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've finally seen what I saw. Elena Thorne. She approached Julian 6 months before he asked you out. I hired an investigator after the engagement. The spyware was sophisticated, installed remotely through a phishing email she sent you about a charity event. I couldn't tell you without proof you'd believe. I couldn't watch you defend him again. So I built something else. Something they can't touch. The real money is safe, baby girl. But you need to let them think they've won. Trust the sequence. Trust what I taught you. I love you. I'm sorry I won't be there to see you destroy them, but you will. You're my daughter. Dad. I pressed my hands over my mouth, tears streaming down my face. But this time, they were different. Hot, furious, grateful, because my father had known. Had seen through Julian's performance from the beginning. Had watched me walk down the aisle to a predator and still loved me enough to protect me anyway. I looked at the numbers again. The empty accounts. The stolen money. The 3 years of calculated theft. Julian and Elena thought I was broke. Thought I was desperate. Thought I'd be easy to manipulate through probate. Through estate taxes. Through whatever legal maze they'd constructed to access the fortune they believed was hiding somewhere. They had no idea that the real fortune wasn't hiding at all. It was a ghost, waiting for the right sequence, the right hands, my hands. I closed the laptop carefully and sat in the silence of my dining room, feeling something settle in my chest. Purpose. Cold, clear, and absolutely certain. Let them think they'd won. Let them think I was the broken widow, confused and overwhelmed. I'd show them what my father had built, and then I'd watch them burn. The text file had mentioned a sequence, but it was the folder buried 3 levels deep in his documents that held what I really needed. A single video file, dated 2 weeks before he died. The thumbnail showed his face, gaunt and pale against the hospital pillow, but his eyes were sharp, alert. The eyes of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. I hesitated before clicking play. This would be the last time I'd hear his voice, the last new words he'd ever speak to me. Once I watched this, there would be nothing left. No more messages, no more guidance. Just the echo of everything I should have listened to while he was alive. I pressed play. "Hey, baby girl." His voice was rough, weakened by illness, but steady. "If you're watching this, then I was right about Julian. God, I wish I'd been wrong." He shifted slightly in the bed, wincing. Someone had propped the laptop on the rolling table, angling it so his face filled the frame. "I need you to know something first. This isn't your fault. You hear me, Maya? None of it. You loved someone. You trusted someone. That's not a weakness. That's who you are, who your mama raised you to be, and I never wanted you to lose that." He paused, his jaw working. "But Julian Vance is a predator." I knew it the moment he sat across from me at that first dinner and asked about my estate planning strategy before he asked about my health. I remembered that dinner, remembered thinking Dad was being unfair, too suspicious, remembered defending Julian in the car on the way home. "I hired investigators," he continued. "Found out he'd done this before. Different names, different cities, but the same pattern. Find a woman with money or family connections. Court her. Marry her if necessary. Drain what he can access. Disappear before anyone realizes. Elena Thorne is his partner. Has been for 6 years. She handles the technical side while he handles the emotional manipulation." My father's expression hardened, and for a moment I saw the businessman who'd built an empire from nothing, the man who didn't accept defeat. "But here's what they don't know. I moved everything the week after your engagement. Every property, every account, every investment. I created a trust structure so complex that even the best forensic accountants would need 6 months and a court order to untangle it. And at the center of it all is a ghost trust, completely legal, completely invisible, and completely inaccessible without the correct sequence." He leaned forward slightly, and I could see the IV line taped to his hand, the hospital bracelet on his wrist. "The sequence is built from things only you and I would know. Things I never shared with anyone, not even in casual conversation. Your mama's maiden name, but spelled backward. The address of our first house, just the numbers. And Zara's birthday, but in European format. Day, month, year. You put them together, no spaces, and that's your access code to the primary trust account." I grabbed a pen, scribbling frantically. Morrison spelled backward. The house number on Ashford Street. Zara's birthday. "There's $23 million, Maya. Everything I built, everything I protected. All waiting for you. But you can't access it yet. Not while they're watching. You need to make them show their hand first. Make them commit to something you can prove. Wire fraud, grand larceny, something federal that sticks. His voice softened, and I saw tears gathering in his eyes. I'm sorry I won't be there to help you through this. Sorry I couldn't protect you from the heartbreak. But I could protect you from the poverty, from the helplessness, from everything Julian thought he'd leave you with. He smiled, and it was so achingly familiar that I felt my chest crack open. You're stronger than you know, baby girl. Stronger than I ever was. You got that from your mama. She would have seen through Julian in 5 minutes flat. I laughed through my tears because it was true. Mom would have eviscerated him. Use the accounts he's already drained as bait. Let him think that's all there was. Let him and Elena get greedy, get sloppy. And when they make their move on what they think is the big score, you'll have everything you need to send them away for a very long time. He was quiet for a moment. His breathing labored. I love you, Maya. I loved watching you grow into the woman you are. I just wish I'd taught you that some people see goodness and want to destroy it rather than cherish it. But you'll learn that now. You'll learn, and you'll survive, and you'll be magnificent. The video ended. I sat frozen, staring at the black screen, my father's last words echoing in the silence. He'd known. He'd seen everything. And while I'd been defending my husband, planning my future, ignoring every gentle warning, my father had been building me a fortress, not to keep me locked away, to keep me safe while I learned to fight. The guilt was overwhelming. All those arguments, all those times I'd accused him of being paranoid, controlling, unable to let me live my own life. And he'd absorbed it all, let me think what I needed to think, and quietly constructed my salvation anyway. I'm sorry, Daddy, I whispered to the empty room. I'm so sorry I didn't trust you. But sorry wouldn't honor what he'd done. Sorry wouldn't make his sacrifice mean something. Action would. I wrote down the sequence, tested it 3 times to make sure I had it right, then tucked the paper into my bra, against my heart. $23 million, a ghost trust, and a father's love that extended beyond death. Julian had no idea what was coming, but he would. Julian came home that evening with takeout from my favorite Thai place and a bouquet of white roses. The roses were a nice touch. He'd remembered that I'd mentioned preferring them to red at some garden party 2 years ago. The kind of detail a loving husband would recall. The kind of detail a con artist would catalog. I thought you could use some comfort food, he said, kissing my cheek as he set the bags on the kitchen counter. You've been so withdrawn lately. I'm worried about you, baby. I let my eyes fill with tears. It wasn't hard. Everything made me cry these days, though the reasons had shifted. I'm sorry. I know I haven't been myself. It's just, everything feels so overwhelming. Hey, no. He pulled me into his arms and I forced myself not to stiffen, forced myself to melt against him the way I used to, before I knew what those arms really held. You don't apologize for grieving. Your father just died. You're allowed to fall apart. Fall apart. Yes, that's exactly what he wanted. A broken woman, too devastated to ask questions, too confused to notice the money disappearing. We ate at the dining room table, the same table where I'd watched my father's video just hours ago. Julian talked about his day, some merger his firm was working on, a client who was being difficult. Normal husband conversation, the kind we'd had 1,000 times. I was thinking, he said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. Maybe we should take a trip. Get away for a while, let you clear your head before we have to deal with all the estate stuff. A trip? I made my voice small, uncertain. I don't know if I can handle that right now. There's so much to do. The lawyer said. The lawyer can wait. His thumb rubbed circles on my palm. Maya, you're exhausted. You're not sleeping. You barely eat. A week somewhere quiet, just us, might help you process everything. Or get me out of the way while he and Elena tore through my father's remaining files, while they searched for the fortune they knew had to exist somewhere. Maybe, I whispered. Can I think about it? Of course. He smiled, warm and patient. Whatever you need. His phone buzzed during dessert. He glanced at the screen and something flickered across his face. Anticipation, quickly masked. I'm sorry, I need to take this. Work emergency. He stepped into his office, closing the door most of the way. But not all the way. Just enough for privacy, not enough to seem suspicious to a trusting wife. I stayed at the table, pushing pad thai around my plate, but every nerve in my body was tuned to the low murmur of his voice from the other room. No, she's fine. Completely clueless. I know, but we need to be patient. Did you check the safe deposit boxes? There has to be... Elena, the man owned half the waterfront district. That money is somewhere. I took a deliberate bite of food, chewing slowly, my face arranged in blank grief. Inside, my mind was racing. They were getting desperate. 3 years of planning, and they still hadn't found what they were looking for, because it was a ghost. Invisible, untouchable. Julian emerged 10 minutes later, his expression apologetic. I'm sorry, baby. Client crisis. I might need to go into the office early tomorrow. That's okay. I stood, started clearing plates. You work so hard. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. You're my wife. Taking care of you is what I signed up for. In the reflection of the darkened window above the sink, I could see both our faces. Mine, soft and sad and trusting. His, tender and concerned. Both of us lying. I love you, I said, because that's what the old Maya would say. The Maya who believed in this marriage, this man, this life we'd built together. I love you too, he whispered against my neck. The words landed like ash, weightless, meaningless. I turned in his arms and kissed him, and it took every ounce of control I had not to pull away, not to scrub my mouth, not to scream the truth into his face. This was the performance. This was survival. One wrong move, one flash of anger or knowledge in my eyes, and he'd know. And if he knew, I'd lose the only advantage I had. When we went to bed that night, Julian pulled me close, stroking my hair until my breathing evened out into what he thought was sleep. His own breathing followed soon after, deep and satisfied. I lay there in the darkness, wide awake, feeling his chest rise and fall against my back, feeling the weight of his arm across my waist. This man who'd held my hand at my father's deathbed, who'd given the eulogy at the funeral, who'd looked the hospice nurses in the eye and thanked them for their care. All of it performance, all of it calculation. I thought about the trip he'd suggested. Some quiet resort where I'd be isolated, dependent, easy to monitor. Or maybe not a resort at all. Maybe somewhere more permanent. Elena had asked if I might become a problem. Julian had said they'd solve it. Grief makes people fragile, Accidents happen. My hand slipped beneath my pillow, touching the folded paper with the sequence written on it. The Ghost Trust. My father's final gift. Julian thought he was sleeping next to a broken widow. He had no idea he was sleeping next to a woman who just inherited $23 million and a hunger for revenge that burned colder than any grief. Let him plan his trip. Let him whisper to Elena about emergencies and opportunities. I'd give them exactly what they wanted. And then I'd give them what they deserved. Elena arrived 3 days later with a leather portfolio and a smile that never reached her eyes. Julian had texted me that morning saying his financial consultant would be stopping by to help me organize some paperwork, as if I'd asked for help, as if I needed a woman who'd stolen 3 years of my life to explain estate taxes to me. I opened the door in yoga pants and one of my father's old Stanford sweatshirts, my hair pulled into a messy bun. No makeup. Red-rimmed eyes that weren't entirely manufactured. The picture of a woman barely holding it together. Maya. Elena's gaze swept over me and I saw the assessment, the cataloging. Weak, vulnerable, manageable. Thank you for seeing me. I know this is a difficult time. Julian said you could help. I stepped back to let her in, my voice soft and uncertain. I don't really understand any of this. Dad always handled everything. And now? That's exactly why I'm here. She followed me into the living room, setting her portfolio on the coffee table with practiced precision. Everything about her was sharp. Her tailored black suit, her geometric blonde bob, the way she sat, spine straight, knees together, like she was posing for a corporate headshot. Estate administration can be overwhelming, especially for someone without financial background. Someone without financial background. The condescension was so smooth I almost missed it. I appreciate it, I said, curling into the corner of the couch. Can I get you coffee or anything? No, thank you. Let's just dive in, shall we? She opened the portfolio, pulling out documents I recognized. My father's will, property deeds, account statements for the accounts she'd already drained. I've taken the liberty of organizing what Julian shared with me. Your father's estate is complicated. He had a lot of businesses. I picked at the sleeve of the sweatshirt. I never really paid attention to the details. That's clear. Her tone was kind, but her eyes glittered. Unfortunately, that's going to make probate challenging. There are tax implications you'll need to address, capital gains issues, potential liabilities we haven't uncovered yet. Liabilities? I let my voice rise slightly, anxious. What kind of liabilities? It's hard to say without a complete picture of his holdings. Elena leaned forward and I caught her perfume, something expensive and cold, like winter roses. Maya, I need you to be honest with me. Did your father have any offshore accounts? Any trusts you're aware of? Safety deposit boxes? There it was. The real reason for this visit. Not to help. To hunt. I don't think so. I made it a question, uncertain. He had the accounts you showed me. The properties. I don't know about anything else. He owned significant real estate. Commercial properties that generated substantial income. But the liquid assets we've located don't match that profile. Her fingers drummed once against the portfolio. A tell. Frustration bleeding through the professional mask. There should be more. Maybe he spent it? I offered. Medical bills were expensive, and he donated a lot to charity. Not enough to account for the discrepancy. Elena's smile tightened. I'm concerned that there might be accounts or assets that will surface during probate. Accounts with tax consequences that could devastate what's left of the estate. I'm trying to help you avoid that. She was good. I'd give her that. The concern in her voice almost sounded genuine, almost made it seem like she cared whether I ended up bankrupt instead of just dead. What should I do? I twisted my hands together, playing the part. I don't want any surprises. You need to give me access. She pulled out a form, already prepared. Power of attorney for estate administration. It would allow me to conduct a thorough audit, locate any hidden assets, ensure everything is properly documented for the IRS. I stared at the form that would give her legal authority to dig through every corner of my father's legacy, to find the ghost trust, to access the $23 million. I don't know, I said slowly. That seems like a lot. Maybe I should ask the estate attorney. Estate attorneys charge by the hour and drag things out. Elena's voice sharpened, just a fraction. Maya, I'm offering to do this as a favor. For Julian. Because he's worried about you. He is? Of course he is. You're falling apart. Anyone can see that. She reached across, patting my hand with fingers that felt like ice. Let someone help you. Let me handle the complicated parts so you can focus on healing. Focus on healing. While she and Julian dismantled everything my father built. While they found the money and figured out how to make me disappear. I looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd hacked into my medical records, who'd installed spyware on my computer, who'd sat in my kitchen drinking champagne over my father's grave. She thought I was stupid. Thought grief had made me soft, pliable, easy to manipulate. Okay, I whispered. Something flashed in her eyes. Victory. But, I continued, I need to ask my cousin Zara first. She's a paralegal. Dad always said I should run legal stuff by her. Elena's smile froze. I don't think you need... Just to be safe. I stood up, wobbling slightly. She's coming over tomorrow. Maybe she can look at the form and then I'll sign it? I'm sorry, I know you're trying to help. I'm so confused right now. Of course. Elena stood too, smoothing her suit. Take your time. Though I would recommend moving quickly. The longer we wait, the more complicated things become. I will. I promise. I walked her to the door and she paused on the threshold. Maya? Her voice dropped, intimate, dangerous. Julian really loves you. He wants what's best for you. Trust him. Trust us. I do, I said, meeting her cold gaze with my own red-rimmed eyes. I don't know what I'd do without him. She left, and I watched through the window as she climbed into her sleek silver Mercedes. Watched her pull out her phone the moment the door closed. Calling Julian, no doubt. Reporting back. The widow was cooperative, confused, malleable, almost ready. I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart racing. Tomorrow I'd tell Julian that Zara advised against signing, that I needed more time. I'd watch them get frustrated, desperate, and then I'd give them something better than power of attorney. I'd give them bait they couldn't resist. The nanny cam arrived in unmarked packaging 2 days later, disguised as a decorative book on the shelf behind Julian's desk. I'd ordered it using a prepaid card and had it shipped to a neighbor's house, then retrieved it while she was at work. Every step careful, every move calculated. Installing it took less than 5 minutes. Point the spine toward the desk. Connect to the app. Test the video feed on my phone. Clear. Now I just needed Julian to take the bait. I spent the morning at my father's storage unit, the one Julian didn't know about because I'd never mentioned it. Dad had kept his oldest business records there, files from when he was first starting out. I found what I needed in a box labeled 1987-1992, an old ledger, the kind people used before everything went digital. Leather-bound, pages yellowed with age, filled with my father's precise handwriting. Back home, I worked at the kitchen table, carefully doctoring one of the blank pages in the back. My father's handwriting was distinctive but not impossible to mimic if you'd seen it your whole life. I practiced on scrap paper first, getting the slant right, the way he formed his sevens with a dash through the middle. Then I wrote it out, clean, official looking. Cayman International Trust, account Sutter CIT 8847392. Primary deposit, $20,000. Access restricted to legacy protocols. Contact, Marcus Lamar, private banking. I added a phone number I'd created using a burner app. Added a date from 6 months before my father died. Made it look like a note he'd scrawled during one of his hospital stays. A reminder to himself about money he'd moved. The account didn't exist, of course. But Elena wouldn't be able to verify that without committing wire fraud herself. And Julian wouldn't wait that long. Not when $20 million was dangling in front of him. I left the ledger on Julian's desk that afternoon, tucked under a stack of mail I'd organized while he was out. Positioned it so the doctored page was visible if you move the top envelope. Not obvious enough to seem planted. Just careless enough to be believable. Then I went upstairs, opened the nanny cam app on my phone, and waited. Julian came home at 6:30. I heard him come in, heard him call my name. In the bedroom, I called back. Just resting. Okay, baby, I have some emails to catch up on. His office door closed. I watched the video feed, my phone screen glowing in the dim bedroom. Julian sat at his desk, loosening his tie, opening his laptop. Normal evening routine. He sorted through the mail absently, tossing junk into the recycling bin. Then his hand stilled. I watched him pull the ledger out, his brow furrowing. Watched him open it, flip through pages, stop when he reached the one I'd prepared. His entire body changed, straightened, focused. He pulled out his phone, and even through the camera's limited audio, I could hear the excitement in his voice. Elena, I found something. No, listen. Cayman International Trust. 20 million. I'm looking at his handwriting right now. It's real. Account number CIT 8847392. I know, but we need to move on this before the estate lawyer finds it. He was quiet, listening. I could see his free hand trembling slightly as he took a photo of the page with his phone. Tonight, I'll tell her I have a late meeting. We can run preliminary verification, see if we can access it remotely, if we can get the transfer initiated before she knows what's in there. Elena, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. He ended the call and just sat there, staring at the ledger like it was a winning lottery ticket. Then he did something that made my stomach turn. He laughed. Not the warm laugh he used around me. Something else. Something triumphant and ugly and real. I watched him photograph the page from multiple angles. Watched him open his laptop and start typing. Probably researching Cayman banking protocols, transfer regulations, anything that would help him steal money that didn't exist. He was so focused, he didn't hear me come downstairs 20 minutes later. Julian. I stood in the doorway, and he jerked, slamming the ledger closed. Hey, baby. His smile was instant, reflexive. I didn't hear you. Feeling better? A little. I moved into the room and he shifted, blocking the desk with his body. What are you working on? Just boring contract stuff. He stood, guiding me away from the desk with a hand on my lower back. Have you eaten? I can order something. I'm not really hungry. I let him steer me toward the door, playing oblivious. Are you coming to bed soon? Little bit. I just need to finish this one thing. I nodded, kissed his cheek, and left him to his planning. Back upstairs, I watched the feed as he immediately reopened the ledger, pulled out his phone again. Watched him pace the office, animated, alive in a way I'd never seen him with me. This was who Julian Vance really was. Not the devoted husband, not the grieving son-in-law. This hungry, calculating predator who just found what he thought was the biggest score of his life. He called Elena 3 more times that night, each call longer than the last. I watched until past midnight, until he finally closed the ledger, put it back exactly where I'd left it, and came upstairs. He slipped into bed beside me, and I felt him relax, satisfied. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd found the treasure. But all he'd really found was the trap. And tomorrow, when he and Elena started trying to access that account, when they initiated transfers and forged documents and committed federal crimes in pursuit of money that would never come, they'd be building their own cage, one wire transfer at a time. I fell asleep that night with Julian's arm around me and my father's voice in my head. Make them show their hand first. Make them commit to something you can prove. They were about to commit everything, and I'd have it all on camera. I pretended to take the sleeping pill Julian offered me at 10 o'clock, pretended to swallow it with water, tilting my head back, letting him see my throat move. He kissed my forehead with such tenderness, such careful concern. Sleep well, baby. You need the rest. I mumbled something incoherent, already letting my eyelids droop. Watched through my lashes as he dimmed the bedroom lights and closed the door softly behind him. The pill sat tucked against my cheek. I spit it into my palm the moment he was gone. 11:15. I heard the front door open and close. Elena's voice, low and urgent, drifting up from downstairs. I slipped out of bed, moved to the top of the stairs where I could hear without being seen. Are you sure she's out? Elena's heels clicked across the hardwood. Sleeping pill. She'll be down for hours. Julian's voice was all business now. No warmth, no performance. Did you bring everything? Laptop, VPN, the authentication software. If this account is real, we can initiate the transfer tonight and have it processed by morning. And if there are security protocols? Then we forge authorization. I have templates from her other accounts, her signature, her ID scans. We've done this before, Julian, just bigger numbers this time. My hands clenched on the banister, hearing it laid out so casually. The fraud, the forgery. Just another Tuesday night for them. I pulled out my phone, opened the Nanny Cam app. The feed showed them settling into Julian's office, Elena setting up her laptop beside his, the glow of the screens washing their faces in cold blue light. This was it. The moment they'd commit to something I could prove, something federal prosecutors would love. I crept back to bed, propped myself against the headboard with my phone, and watched. Elena's fingers flew across her keyboard. Okay, I'm routing us through the Cayman servers, running a verification check on the account number first. Julian leaned over her shoulder, his face tense with anticipation. Minutes passed. The camera picked up Elena's frustrated exhale. The account exists. What? Julian's voice cracked with excitement. It's real. Cayman International Trust. Account number matches. And there's a balance flag showing significant holdings. I can't see the exact amount without authentication, but the system's recognizing it as a verified high-value account. My heart stuttered. The account existed? How is that possible? I'd made up the number, the bank, everything. Unless my father had actually created it. Created a real account, a real trap, knowing that anyone who found that ledger would try exactly this. He'd built the honeypot himself years ago, waiting for the thieves to stick their hands in. Can you access it? Julian was pacing now, unable to sit still. I need authorization credentials, her ID, her signature, proof of inheritance. Good thing we've been preparing for this. Elena pulled up files I recognized. Scans of my driver's license, my passport, my signature from the joint account applications Julian had insisted we fill out after the wedding. She was creating a forgery packet in real time. I watched her work, fast and efficient, copying my information into authorization forms for a Cayman bank. Documents that would show I'd requested the transfer. Documents that would make it look like I was complicit in moving my own inheritance offshore. There. She hit a key with finality. Authorization package complete. Now we just need the receiving account information. The Shell Corp in Panama? Julian pulled up something on his laptop. The one we used for the Hartford job? The Hartford job. Another victim. Another woman they'd destroyed. Perfect. Untraceable. And we can move the funds from there into multiple accounts within hours. Elena's voice was pure satisfaction. By the time anyone realizes what happened, we'll be ghosts. They worked in tandem, their movements synchronized from practice. How many times had they done this? How many people had they ruined? Julian read out a long account number. Elena typed. The screens reflected in their eyes, numbers and fields and digital paperwork that would send them to prison if I documented everything correctly. And I had. Every second, every keystroke, every word. Initiating transfer request. Elena's finger hovered over the enter key. $20 million from Cayman International Trust to Panama Holdings LLC. Once I submit this, there's no going back. Do it. Julian's voice was hard, certain. She pressed enter. The screens both flickered, changed, and suddenly the calm blue glow shifted to harsh red. What? Elena started. Text appeared across her screen, large and official. I couldn't read it from the camera angle, but I could see their faces change. Confusion, then shock. Then pure, visceral fear. It's a federal monitoring account, Elena whispered. Julian, this is a trap. This whole account is a honeypot. Oh God, we just submitted forged authorization documents to a federally monitored system. What? Julian grabbed her laptop. No, that's not possible. The ledger was real. I saw his handwriting. He set us up. Elena was frantically typing, trying to cancel the transaction, but the screens were frozen. He knew. He knew someone would try this, and he created a monitored account to catch them. Us. We're caught. The office door burst open, not me. I was still upstairs, phone clutched in my shaking hands. Federal agents. 3 of them, moving fast, weapons drawn. Hands where we can see them. Step away from the computers. Julian and Elena both froze. Their faces ghost white in the flashing red of the screen warnings. I watched through the camera as they were separated, handcuffed, read their rights. Watched Julian's face crumble as he realized what had happened. Watched Elena's cold professionalism shatter into panic. Watched everything my father had built for me spring closed like a steel trap. Someone knocked on the bedroom door. I turned off my phone screen, my heart hammering. Mrs. Vance, this is Agent Miles, FBI. We need you to come downstairs, please. You're not in danger. I let myself shake as I opened the door. Let tears stream down my face as Agent Miles, a kind-faced woman in her 40s, guided me downstairs. Julian saw me from where he stood in handcuffs. Maya, baby, I can explain. Don't speak to her, Agent Miles said sharply. But I looked at him anyway. Really looked at him. This man who'd held me while I cried, who'd planned my murder, who just tried to steal everything my father had protected. I trusted you, I whispered. And for the first time in our entire marriage, I meant every word. Agent Miles sat me down in the living room while her colleagues processed the scene in Julian's office. She brought me water I didn't drink, a blanket I didn't need. Played the part of the protective federal agent shielding a traumatized victim. She had no idea I'd orchestrated the entire thing. Mrs. Vance, I know this is shocking, she said gently, but we've been investigating your husband and Elena Thorne for 18 months. We just needed them to make a move we could prosecute. 18 months? I let my voice break. What did they do? Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit grand larceny. Tonight they attempted to access a monitored account using forged authorization documents bearing your signature and identification. She paused. Your father set up that account 6 months before he died. He came to us with evidence that someone was systematically draining your assets. He wanted to protect you. The story was perfect. Better than anything I could have invented. My father had gone to the FBI, had worked with them to build the trap, had died knowing his daughter would be safe because federal agents were watching. Except he hadn't. I'd found no mention of the FBI in his files. No contact with Agent Miles or anyone else. Which meant they'd been watching Julian and Elena independent of my father. Had been building a case. And my manufactured ledger, my fake Cayman account, had inadvertently triggered a sting operation that was already in motion. My father's ghost trust was still out there, untouched. $23 million the FBI knew nothing about. I looked up at Agent Miles with wet eyes. Is Julian going to jail? Yes. Her voice was firm. Both of them. We have everything we need. The forged documents, the attempted transfer, the authentication fraud. Federal charges, Mrs. Vance. They won't see daylight for a very long time. Through the office doorway, I could see Julian being led out in handcuffs. He was arguing, his voice rising in pitch. You don't understand. Maya doesn't know anything about finances. I was helping her. She asked me to handle the estate. Save it for your lawyer, one of the agents said. Elena was silent, her face a mask of cold calculation even now. She was already planning her defense, her plea bargain, her survival. But her eyes found mine as they walked her past the living room, and I saw the moment she understood. The confusion, then the dawning realization. The grieving widow who couldn't understand finances, who needed help with estate taxes, who'd left a convenient ledger on her husband's desk, who'd played them better than they'd ever played anyone. You, Elena breathed. You knew. Agent Miles stepped between us. Keep moving, Ms. Thorne. But Elena twisted in her captor's grip, staring at me with something like horrified respect. How long? How long have you known? I didn't answer. just looked at her with the same red-rimmed eyes, the same devastated expression I'd worn for weeks. Let her wonder. Let her spend her prison sentence trying to figure out when the prey became the predator. Julian stopped in the doorway, finally looking at me. Really looking. Maybe for the first time in our entire relationship. His brown eyes scanned my face, my posture, the way I sat wrapped in the blanket Agent Miles had provided. I watched him see past the performance to the truth underneath. Maya, my name came out strangled. What did you do? Mrs. Vance doesn't have to answer that, Agent Miles said firmly. But I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I stood slowly, letting the blanket fall away. Stood in my silk pajamas in the living room of the house Julian had thought he'd charmed his way into. The house that had always been mine. That would always be mine. I trusted my father, I said quietly, each word deliberate, sharp. He told me you were dangerous. He told me to be careful, and I didn't listen. Julian's face twisted. You set this up. The ledger, the account, everything. Your husband attempted to commit federal wire fraud, Agent Miles interrupted. That's not Mrs. Vance's fault. She's not the victim here. Julian's voice cracked, all that calculated charm shattering into rage. She knew. She's been playing us. Elena, tell them. Tell them she's not some helpless widow. Enough. The agent holding him tightened her grip. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. They dragged him toward the door, still protesting, still trying to shift blame, trying to make me the villain in a story where he'd targeted a grieving woman and plotted to steal her inheritance, where he'd discussed my murder over champagne. Elena had stopped fighting. She just watched me as they let her out, her professional mask finally cracked, revealing something almost like admiration underneath the hatred. The sleeping pill, she said suddenly. You didn't take it. I smiled. Small. Cold. No. How much did you hear? Everything. The federal agent looked between us, confused, but Elena understood. She'd been in that office. She'd discussed the Hartford job, the forged documents, the Panama accounts. She'd laid out their entire criminal enterprise thinking I was unconscious upstairs, and I'd recorded every word. Smart, Elena said finally. Your father trained you well. He protected me, I corrected, even when I didn't deserve it. They took her then, out into the night where police lights painted the street in red and blue. Neighbors stood on their lawns in bathrobes, watching Julian Vance and his mistress being loaded into separate federal vehicles, watching the perfect husband revealed as a predator. I stayed in the doorway, Agent Miles beside me, playing the shocked wife for the audience. Inside, though, my heart was singing. They were gone. Arrested, facing years in federal prison. And I was free. Free of Julian's calculated touches. Free of Elena's cold assessment. Free of the performance I'd maintained for weeks. The mask of the broken widow who needed saving. Agent Miles touched my shoulder gently. You'll need to come in for a statement tomorrow. We'll need to document everything they stole, everything they forged. It's going to be a long process. I understand. But tonight, you should rest. Is there someone who can stay with you? Family? My cousin Zara. I'll call her. Agent Miles squeezed my shoulder one more time, then left with her team, leaving me alone in the house that suddenly felt enormous and quiet and completely, perfectly mine. I closed the door, locked it, leaned against it, and felt something break open in my chest. Not my heart. That had already broken, already frozen, already reformed into something harder. This was relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. I'd won. My father had given me the weapons, the ghost trust, the knowledge, the final video message that had shown me exactly who I was fighting. But I'd won the war myself. I pulled out my phone, looked at the nanny cam footage I'd saved. Julian and Elena at the computers, committing federal crimes in crisp digital clarity. Insurance, if I needed it. Proof, if anyone questioned my innocence. Then I opened my father's encrypted files and looked at the sequence one more time. The ghost trust, the real fortune, untouched, unknown, mine, $23 million, and a future Julian Vance would never touch. I whispered to the empty house, to my father's memory, to the woman I'd become in the space between grief and rage. Thank you, Daddy. I'm safe now. Outside, the police lights faded. Inside, Maya Vance, the mark, the prey, the broken widow, smiled. The trial took 8 months. 8 months of depositions and evidence reviews and sitting across from defense attorneys who tried to paint me as complicit, as aware, as anything other than what I was. A woman who'd trusted the wrong man. They never found the ghost trust. The FBI cataloged Julian's thefts, Elena's hacking, the 3-year systematic drainage of my visible accounts. They uncovered the Hartford victim Elena had mentioned, and 2 others before her. Women Julian had courted, married, and financially destroyed before disappearing. But they never found my father's real legacy. I accessed it 3 weeks after the arrest, sitting in a private wealth manager's office with the sequence written on paper I burned immediately after. Watched the account balance load on the screen with numbers that made my breath catch. $23 million wasn't quite accurate. My father had been conservative in his video. The trust had grown. Investments he'd made, properties held in nested LLCs, dividends that had been quietly compounding for years. $31 million. The wealth manager, a woman named Patricia Brown who'd worked with my father for 20 years, smiled at my expression. Your father was very specific about the conditions for access. He said if you were entering this sequence, it meant you'd survived something terrible. He wanted you to know you'd never have to survive anything like it again. I couldn't speak, could only nod as tears streamed down my face. He also left instructions, Patricia continued, sliding a sealed envelope across the desk, to be opened only by you, only after you'd access the account. Inside, in my father's handwriting, Maya, if you're reading this, you're stronger than you know, stronger than I ever was. Use this money to build something that matters, something that protects other daughters. I love you. I'm proud of you. I always was. Dad. The trial ended with guilty verdicts on all counts. Julian got 12 years federal. Elena got 15 because of the hacking charges and prior convictions they'd uncovered. I watched the sentencing from the gallery, flanked by Zara and the FBI's victim advocate. Julian looked at me once as they led him away. Not with anger anymore, with something sadder. Recognition, maybe, of the woman he'd underestimated, the mark who'd marked him instead. I felt nothing. No triumph, no vindication, just closure. I visited my father's grave on a Thursday afternoon 6 months after the sentencing. The weather was perfect. Warm sun filtering through the trees that lined the cemetery, birds singing in the branches overhead. I brought white roses and sat on the grass beside his headstone. You were right, I said quietly. About Julian. About everything. I'm sorry I didn't listen. I'm sorry I made you spend your last months worried about me instead of focused on healing. The wind rustled through the leaves. Somewhere, a wind chime was playing, delicate and clear. But I'm safe now. I'm more than safe. I'm free. I traced his name carved in granite. Lawrence Sterling. I'm taking back my maiden name. Going back to Maya Sterling. Starting fresh. I told him about the foundation I was building. Sterling Shield, I was calling it. A nonprofit that would provide financial literacy training, legal support, and protective resources for women escaping financially abusive relationships. We'd help them hide assets legally, spot red flags, protect themselves before predators like Julian could strike. Elena kept detailed records, I said. The FBI let me review them after the trial. She had a whole system for identifying targets: women with inheritance potential, elderly parents, trust funds. She'd hack medical records to find terminal diagnoses, then send Julian in to court the daughters. I paused. There are probably dozens more we haven't found. Women who don't even know they were targeted. The foundation would find them, would help them. I'm using your money to build something that matters, Dad. Something that protects other daughters, just like you asked. My voice broke. I wish you were here to see it. I wish you could meet the woman I'm becoming. But maybe he could. Maybe he'd always known this woman was in there, buried under the need to be loved, to be chosen, to believe in fairy tales. Maybe he'd seen her strength before she had. I stood slowly, brushing grass from my black dress. Black still, but not for mourning anymore, for power, for the boardroom meetings and legal consultations and television interviews I'd been doing, telling my story, warning other women. I love you, Daddy. Thank you for everything, for the trust, for the protection, for believing in me even when I couldn't believe in myself. The wind picked up, warm and gentle, and I swear I felt something. A presence. A blessing. I walked back to my car, a sensible sedan, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth, and drove to the office space I'd leased downtown. Sterling Shield occupied the entire third floor of a building my father had owned, one I'd discovered in the trust portfolio. Even in death, he was providing. Zara met me in the lobby, tablet in hand, wearing the professional smile of a woman who'd quit her paralegal job to become my director of operations. We have 12 new applications this morning, women from 3 different states. One of them saw your interview on CNN. Set up calls. I want to talk to each of them personally. Already done. Also, the lawyer called. Julian's appeal was denied. Good. I stepped into the elevator, Zara beside me. Any word from Elena's people? Her attorney reached out again. She wants to provide information in exchange for a sentence reduction. Names, methods, other victims. I considered it. Elena had knowledge that could save dozens of women from what I'd survived, but she'd also helped destroy them. Tell them we'll consider it if she agrees to recorded testimony that we can use in our educational materials. Full confession. No omissions. Zara grinned. You're terrifying when you negotiate. I learned from the best. I thought of my father across boardroom tables, closing deals with quiet intensity. He taught me everything. I just didn't realize it until I needed it. The elevator opened onto our floor. Through the glass doors, I could see the team I'd assembled. Lawyers, financial advisors, therapists, all working together to build something that hadn't existed before. A shield, a weapon, a way forward for women who'd been targeted by predators. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Vance financial fraud case cited in new federal legislation. Congress was using Julian and Elena's case to strengthen wire fraud laws, close loopholes, make it harder for con artists to exploit grieving families. Something good coming from something terrible. I looked at my reflection in the glass doors. Maya Sterling, 30 years old, caramel-skinned and beautiful in a way that no longer made me a target because I'd learned what my father had always known. Worth isn't about appearance or inheritance or the love of a man who never loved you. Worth is what you build from the ashes. And I was building an empire. Not of money, though I had that now. Of protection. Of power. Of women who would never again stand in their hallways listening to their husbands toast their fathers' deaths. I pushed open the doors to Sterling's shield and stepped into my legacy. The one Julian couldn't steal. The one my father had protected. The one I'd claimed for myself. If you enjoyed this story, you're welcome to stay. Subscribe to Lumi's Love Library for new stories every day. And if you're not ready to leave yet, there's another story waiting for you in the playlist on your screen right now.